The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr Speaker, I'm happy to take a very brief call in the third reading of this bill and just say to members it's amazing that with the passage of time how much once was sort of considered almost not even thinkable becomes the norm. Because, sir, when I grew up in the workforce very early on, the idea of paid parental leave would have been a complete... well, you wouldn't have even thought of it. I've got 3 fantastic kids. They're all adopted, so I didn't even get the enjoyment part of it. I just got the kids and the spending part of it. And, sir, I didn't get any of the money from the government or anyone else for bringing them up. But I accept fully that the world moves on. And I accept that the government has made quite a few changes. In fact, I think we've gone from 14 to 16 weeks, and then on the 1st of April this year, there'll be 18 weeks of paid parental leave. And that's just the way the world is moving. That's just the way other countries are going, and I just have to accept that I'm a dinosaur and living in the old days, that everyone should look after their own costs and pay their own way. I accept that, fully accept it. Happy, put it down on record, Hansard now, dinosaur. There you go.
Rainbow.
But, sir, I also think that some of the flexibility that's being brought into the paid parental leave was important so that, you know, the identification of who was the primary caregiver and under what circumstances you could have variations and so on was important, and that's done. Come to the next one, which was 0-hour contracts, and again, I thought I was a dinosaur on this one, and then I realised I had misunderstood what was meant. So when I worked in the aviation industry, and particularly in America, there were lots and lots of mainly women who had 0-hour contracts with the airlines to be flight attendants. And they actually loved it because they didn't have to take the call when it came. They didn't have to be available. They could work at a florist or whatever, but one day they'd get a call, did they want to do a New York run? And they'd think, hey, why not? And that's what I thought 0 hours contract was. And then I realised that it's got a more sinister element. That sinister element is you will not be able to work for anyone else, and you will be sitting at home waiting on the phone for me to call you, and if I don't, you won't get paid, but if you work for anybody else, you breach the contract. And so that's just completely madness. That is simply, completely and utterly madness. If you are going to hold someone's time in your hand, then you have to pay for it. Unless you say to them, I'll call you up, and if you're free and you'd like to come and do a few hours, good on you. But if you're not available or you don't answer the call, that's fine. I've got 5 or 6 people on my list and I can phone around. I'd actually like to have that, say, in my electorate office. Have 2 or 3 people that I could call up from time to time and say, would you be able to do some covering hours on Friday because one of my permanent staff is going to a meeting or whatever. So I think it's really good that this legislation addresses what I think is quite a pernicious element, which says, we'll hold you in our hand, we'll lock you in from any other employment. Oh, by the way, you actually could do it with someone you didn't like. You could say, I'll lock you into a contract, you can't work for anybody else, and then never give them any hours, which is just wrong. And so I congratulate all of the parties for getting this, and sir, I think I've pretty much expired my time here, so I'm just going to say the last thing was to try and do was to enforce Labor laws. And so I'm a big fan of if you've got laws, and there are rules about what makes up a good employer, that you actually enforce them. I'm not a big fan of all the laws we've got. I think some of them are way too draconian and way too over the top, but I am a fan of if they are on the books and they were passed by this parliament, then those rules should be enforced, and this legislation goes a long way to improving the enforcement, sir, and so I support this bill in all of its phases.